Okay, I think I should be live on YouTube. That's a first. This is Octafina, and I am streaming this live from a cozy, gorgeous studio in the heart of Eindhoven, the Netherlands, where I've been existing physically for a while now, but emotionally and mentally, I've existed in Eindhoven since 2017 when I first learned about this place. And I discovered that it merges art, technology, design, and innovation in a very attractive way because even though I have a somewhat traditional background professionally, I am a trained journalist. I have degrees in journalism and mass communication and business administration from college. I have worked in graphic design, in education, in IT. I've got a bunch of different things behind me, and I've played with different concepts on different playgrounds. And for me, just the driving force behind everything I do is my creativity. And I've been creative for as long as I can remember. I just never allowed myself to believe that I can have a creative path for making money. And because I reached the point of full desperation last summer, I got to the edge of suicide, and I had many, many days when I didn't want to exist. And I had been struggling with my mental health for many years. I've had severe depression almost every year since college. I've basically struggled a lot, like we all do. And last year, I was officially formally diagnosed, although that's bullshit because a diagnosis is something that can help or harm depending on how we use that. And for me, receiving a diagnosis was validating because I had already self diagnosed myself basically a year ago, just being very self aware and very kind of focused on studying myself and my patterns and my self-destructive behaviors and all that. And so I was just able to reach a diagnosis, and that turned out to be bipolar disorder type 2, which is a genetically predisposed condition that can either basically stay silent and never emerge, remain dormant, or get unleashed like a monster with the help of circumstances in life, such as trauma, difficult experiences. And basically, that's what we all have in common. We all have difficult experiences. But in any case, mine just took me down a weird road. And because I have bipolar disorder, because I also have, it's very likely that I have borderline personality disorder, which is a different thing. It's something that can form as a consequence of trauma. Um, it's a both things are just very very how to say nuanced, both of these diagnoses, and there's a lot to say for both. I have lived with many symptoms and navigated many symptoms for many years, and I can speak to what an experience of that can be like, but everybody's experience is unique. And so, what I thought was useful in my case was that art, making art, being creative, allowing myself unstructured playtime with different, you know, supplies and materials, like having the privilege and the luxury to leave that space open for me to create saved my life. That is not an exaggeration. Last summer, I met a Ukrainian psychotherapist and psychiatrist who encouraged me to, make art, to process shit, to go through the difficult experiences that I've been through and kind of start integrating all of that because there was a period in my life that lasted for basically about 7 years, where I just went from one major crisis into another, and with no break, like with months break. And it involved my grandmother dying unexpectedly from vulvar cancer, of all things. Yes, that is pussy cancer. And I did not know you can have that until then. So she died from that in like 45 days in front of my eyes. And that broke me because we were very close, and she was the first person that I knew who died. And that sucked. And the way she died was difficult. And we in society are really not trained how to deal with death. Like, nobody ever prepares you for that. It's a weird thing to prepare for, yet we all experience it. So maybe it's a good idea to pay some attention to that. But after that, I got pregnant happily with my partner, then lost the baby. I had a miscarriage, which was ridiculously traumatic and painful. I essentially went through the whole delivery with all the contractions and everything, but delivered a dead fetus, which was not a great outcome after such amounts of pain. But in any case, that was something else that society doesn't prepare you for. And I had to navigate on my own. And that was weird and difficult. And then in the meantime, I'm building a successful corporate career in IT. I'm the youngest senior technical writer in my department, in the whole company. And I am, I lecture at conferences, I organize activities. I am the person who started Women in Technical Communication Bulgaria, or kind of bullshit, because I'm an overachieving, self-abusive, deeply insecure millennial with lots to prove. I just spent my 20s grinding and pushing and working more than I should, and just technically contributing to the onset of my bipolar disorder, which is not a great thing to admit and realize, but is the truth for many people who bring on themselves various physical ailments with their lifestyle choices, which I certainly have. And that successful career turned into me being yelled at by my bosses on my last day at work, and literally being kind of screamed out of the office because I'd stopped working after being, the it girl for almost 3 years, a little over two. I burned out. It got super bad. A third of my hair fell out. My miscarriage coincided with the most stressful period at that job. I was at work at 6 a.m. and unfortunately nobody expected that from me. So I did this on my own, and lost a third of my hair. My body started covering with spontaneous bruises, like all over, as if my partner was beating or something. It was ridiculous. My gums were bleeding, couldn't eat a banana. I had all these physical symptoms, and no doctor obviously could diagnose anything, because that's what happens when when you put yourself through such severe amounts of stress and pressure and like self-abuse, that your body just starts kind of giving up on you or attracting attention, screaming for help, which is what mine did. And I didn't pay attention for a long time. And then things were deteriorating rapidly because I was, after I ended my corporate career, I dedicated myself fully to an endeavor that had been a big part of my life prior to that moment as well. But it had been together with my corporate job. And the thing that I did was that I turned a food blog that I created when my grandmother died, I turned that into a social enterprise. And it was successful in terms of the impact, social impact it had. And it got me on a TEDx stage and on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. But it didn't ultimately take me where I needed to go creatively. And it got at some point very limiting for me. But that didn't stop me from starting to make a profit with it, because I ended up coming up with, concepts for workshops and training sessions, and I had corporate clients and schools as clients, and I was developing recipes for international brands, because that's one of the things that I've done. I just invent concepts for dishes and create recipes on the fly, just creatively thinking about ingredients. And just when the things started getting more stable and I was making some money again, the pandemic hit, and that just started a whole other shit show. And things just kept happening. And at one point, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, which, after losing my grandmother to cancer, was just. But my mom is okay, which is the best thing ever. She's healthy now and she's just fully alive. But last summer I just hit rock bottom, because my system couldn't process all of that anymore. And it had been getting worse and worse, but last summer it got really bad, to the point where I could literally barely articulate myself. It was hard for me to form sentences, to speak my mind. That was impossible, because it was such a mess in my head. I had no idea what's going on. I had lost all ability to feel positive emotion of any kind. I didn't remember in my body, I didn't remember what it's like to feel joy. That was not a concept I was familiar with. Couldn't listen to podcasts or anything, audiobooks, none of that, no lectures, nothing. I just couldn't focus, couldn't read. I would get distracted every 3 lines, basically. All of my cognitive functions were very severely compromised. And this is a scary thing for somebody who takes pride in being smart, because I've always been insecure about my looks, but I've always known that I'm smart, even if I didn't show it to people. I showed specific things of it, but not how smart I was, just because that's not really a comfortable thing when you're largely misunderstood in many ways. And you just learn to say things that are accepted and understood by people, unless you are taught to be confident from an early age and stand your ground, which I didn't do. And so I started doing that through my art. Last summer, because I couldn't speak, I started letting my hand fucking move on the page, because I needed, I'm a very emotional person, and somebody who has bipolar disorder is by definition emotional, because we've got very high highs and very low lows, and all emotional waves that play in that kind of space are extremely intense. And if you don't have your words to express your emotion, which I had done my entire life, because I'm a trained journalist and I've always loved writing, if you don't have access to that, things get weird and scary. And so I had to do something about it, and I started drawing. And I've got a bunch of my art here. I don't have my first, very, very first notebooks, but they were really only just some random shapes with no concept, just some symmetrical stuff that I would let my hand do, because my hand needed to move and I didn't have the depth to have a concept and try to create something. And so I just let my hand move, and that was therapeutic. and I colored the shapes and like made them just look neat. That did it for me for whatever reason at that point. And then I gradually started experimenting with some shapes that I was comfortable with, which in my case were circles mostly and improvisations within like in that kind of plane. And so I started making little drawings, and I have included here a bunch of them that have since turned into my NFT collections. I from somebody who was not an artist and was not a technical person, I somehow managed to get myself into the NFT space as an artist and make a bunch of money, which was completely unexpected. I mean, I hoped it would happen because I desperately needed the money. But I didn't think it would, and it did. And the way it did was that I just told my story. I just spoke up. I had somehow found my way to the NFT space as a technology, as a dimension, as a slice of reality. And then I met some people there who were able to appreciate my story. And they started, I started right around last October to draw these trippy doodles that look like something a 5-year-old on shrooms would do, running with the colorful markers. But my style is very trippy. It's very weird. It is all about inner exploration because it asks you what you see, doesn't tell you what you should see. It's playful, it's engaging. You can see many things that I didn't intentionally put into my art. You can see them there just because your mind will tell you they're there, which is great because I think that art is a good way to play with our minds and just like see what shows up for us, because the different people that see my art see different things in it, and it's all very weird. Some of these are created on literally notebooks, like just fucking the cheapest shit that I found, like this one, which I literally created at the edge of suicide. Um, and then colored it a few months later when I was in better mood, but it was on a notebook because I didn't have anything else. And then I gradually started kind of grading. And my therapist at the time, who had encouraged me to start drawing, started kind of giving me these amazing gifts that included Sharpies and notebooks, bigger. See, the size of my confidence kind of corresponds, as an artist, corresponds to the size of my canvas, which is fun. And then she started giving me some prompts to play with because my doodles they just kept evolving. They were weird in their own way, but my style kind of started shaping up, and I started developing this visual language that allows me to convey emotions, to like tell stories. Like this piece I created, I was in such a bad shape. I was struggling emotionally tremendously, and it was the perfect kind of metaphor for living with bipolar, because like there are completely different universes within you, and that's not just my case. That's the case with everyone. Everybody has so many parts that coexist, and it's often about which of the parts we encourage to like show up more, which of the parts we strengthen. My autopilot, my default is very cruel, ruthless, bitchy, self-abusive, and I just need to pay attention and not let that side of me, that part of me, take over. And so this piece was just me kind of going over my inner monologue and, saying myself that I'm a fucking failure, that I should disappear forever, that nobody cares about me, that I shouldn't exist. And these are all the things I say to myself on a daily basis often. And that's not fun. But it's great when you can put it in your art because it adds flavor and it's my reality. So it's kind of having my imprint on it. Um, I kept playing with different colors and telling, different stories based on the mental state that I was in at a given moment. And I kept drawing and drawing and drawing, and I was drawing on paper and I was drawing on plates, which I don't have with me right now because they are all in Bulgaria. Had to leave them there after I relocated to the Netherlands a month ago. At the end of a 9-year long relationship. Oh, this piece is just becoming my first magazine cover, and it's on the cover of Bacchus, which is a prestigious Bulgarian magazine for food culture and basically just such experiences within the food space and enjoying life and good wine and things like that. So I kept experimenting, and at some point I started getting a little bit kind of bored again, just because I am somebody who is entertained and amused by novelty, and so I always need to push myself and to let my imagination go to a new place because otherwise I'm just not entertained. And so I decided to start playing with different canvases, and I started drawing on the human body. And I have a bunch of sessions that I did with some of my friends. I've drawn on their backs, I've drawn on their boobs. It's been so much fun. They love it because for people who enjoy, um, who like their backs touched, basically, whose backs are erogenous zones, let's put it that way, um, having your back kind of stroked with brushes and feeling the art come to life on your back. Because every time I create a piece, it's an authentic experience. It cannot be rehearsed because it comes to life as I'm creating it on the person, and the person feels my fingers and the brushes that I use to make the art. And it's a very, very embodying experience because you are called to come back to your body. Your senses are just very pleased if you are a person who enjoys that type of stimulation. And so that felt great for the person and for me. And at one point, I actually started doing it on my own. I started using my own body as a canvas. And that was a creative project that I just released actually 2 days ago. And I'm still not promoting that heavily because this is the most vulnerable and intimate project that I've done in my life. And it was very scary to do for me. It was very uncomfortable, but it was very healing and therapeutic. And I'm just savoring the feeling that I got from committing to that project and completing that project. And I am not in any rush to have social feedback on the project because it is something that people wouldn't usually expect from me. And there is gonna be some stuff that I hear that I'm not gonna like. I'm prepared for that, and it doesn't matter. But I just wanna savor this quiet time for a little bit. Um, and when I again would get bored with a canvas, I would pick up a new one. And I at one point started making clothes. I put one of my first drawings, this one, which was actually picked up as an NFT by the amazing Chloe Grace, who is an extreme weather photographer. She's probably transgender, and she is um, just the most amazing person on earth. I love her so much. She's been struck by lightning, and she was the person who welcomed me to the NFT space, weirdly, in her space where I spoke for the first time. I think it was terrifying. Um, I don't know how I did it, why I did it, but I did it. And thanks to that, she became my collector and bought a bunch of my NFTs from both of my collections. It was amazing. And so I put that drawing on that shirt. It was a very ugly shirt. It was a t-shirt. And then I just did the design and cut it and just did the back, played with it, did this technique, which it is super simple to make, but it looks pretty cool. And turned out I like making clothes, and I actually made this top also, which is a whole different experiment. For me, that allows me to really step into my inner child. Like I just play. It's the same, it's the exact same feeling that I had as a child, because my first memories of doing things were of doing creative things. Just like, I guess they mattered enough for me to remember. I remember using my hands. I remember my grandmother teaching me um, to knit and to do different things. And I just recently, a few days ago, realized that just like food has been a placeholder for me, it's been a numbing behavior, something to fill a void somewhere in me. There's just like food has been that, because I've had an eating disorder since I was a teenager, and that has a whole separate backstory. But just like food has been that thing for me, art has been as well, without me actually realizing that. And now that I have art as a tool to regulate my emotions and channel whatever pain I'm experiencing, now that I have that as a tool, I can just apply it and use it on a regular basis, and turn that into a self-care practice that allows me to just keep a good mental health hygiene, which for me is super important. It's important for everyone, but for me especially, it's what basically determines if I'm gonna be suicidal or feel, you know, joyful and excited about life. And that's a big difference. So that's one of my go-to practices, making art, but in a playful, childlike way, unstructured, unscripted, unedited, weird, wild, and wicked. That's why my doodles have their limbs coming from different sides of the pages. That's why I have my character. Um, that's me actually, and I realized it's me when a friend of mine, another Bulgarian artist based in Berlin, Yagama, asked me why I keep drawing her, and I'm like, well, yeah, well, I think that's me. And then it was a stupid answer that I gave in an interview. I mean, it made sense at the time, but then I realized, well, you know what, actually that's not it. The thing is, there's two components to why I keep drawing the same character, with, obviously exceptions, but mostly I keep drawing the same character, and she is indeed me. But the reason she's me and I keep drawing her is because when I was a child, my dad would draw for me um, a bear behind a tree in a very annoyingly creative way. He would just draw the like two lines for a tree, and then like the little paws of the bear, whatever. Oh my god, how is that called? Yeah, it's just like as if the bear was hiding behind a tree, and that was just, technically it was true, but it bugged me because he was lazy. And then as I grew up, I guess that's one of the ways how I picked up my dad's creativity, because my dad is the most creative person I know. He can turn trash into treasure like that, and I love that about him. Um, and my mom, when I was young, she was studying two like disciplines, very, very difficult. And she had exams to prepare for, and I'm a child at this point, a toddler, and I want obviously attention. And she would put me on her knee and study, and I would go, okay, mom, now draw me a little girl and tell me her story. That was every time. And she must have been annoyed as fuck. But I exactly remember the girl that she would draw for me looked like. And my mom couldn't draw. Like, my mom has many, 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 many talents, many things she does excellently, but she cannot draw. And the girl looked in a very specific way, and I guess that kind of left um, a very deep kind of impact on my memory. And these things maybe kind of coincided um, when they happened in terms of the timeline of my life. And I guess they merged and came together to represent a happy place in my mind where I can go to by using my art, which is a very good strategy to have, and to have your subconscious kind of co-create with you. So that's why I thought, you know what, I will start sharing how I approach my art making, because it helps my mental health, and many people can benefit from that and can't afford therapy professionally. And I stumbled upon it and was privileged to have access to excellent therapists, and just develop a bunch of tools that I can share, because many people really can't afford that. And unfortunately, mental health is kind of the most important subject for me, because not only have I lived with these challenges for these many years, my aunt was schizophrenic, and she died more similar to a vegetable than to a human being, which is not a great thing to witness. And it's an even more difficult thing when you have been compared to this person by your grandparents and by their friends, because they would often compare me to her, but they compared me to somebody I never knew, because she changed dramatically around the time I was born. She was actually the one who introduced my parents, and I never knew her as a fully functioning human being. And that felt unfair. She um, experienced a very severe trauma in her life, and spent the last decades of it being taken care of by her parents and not having a life, which is no way to live. And on top of that, my dad has struggled with alcohol addiction for most of my life, and that hasn't been easy, in a completely different way. And I also learned that my mom struggled with depression for quite a while when I was a child. So mental health kind of is my thing, and I now have the luxury to speak up about it, and just share a story of somebody who lives with mental illness and is one of the lucky people who didn't commit suicide, because I ended up getting involved in a project that required me to know some numbers. And according to the World Health Organization, every 40 seconds somebody takes their own life, which adds up to about 2,000 suicides per day, every single fucking day of the year. And that is about 700,000 suicides every year. And that's a lot. That is a lot of suicides every year. And many of the people who end up taking their own life are people who are desperate, who see no hope. And many of these people are not at the poverty line. Many of these people seem like they've got their shit together from the outside looking in, but they don't. Just like I didn't. And when I was, in my 20s, ambitious and driven and had all that energy, I didn't imagine ever wanting to kill myself. But I did, because I felt like failure. Because I had been unable to support myself financially for years because of my mental health struggles and my instability and all the depression and all the episodes and all that fucking shit that I've had to navigate. I've had a hard time supporting myself, and I've had the luxury to have a partner who did that. And now that he doesn't anymore, I am responsible to show that people with mental illness can actually thrive. And the least I can do is share the story. So if at least one person finds it relatable in any fucking way and feels a little less lonely, a little less fucked up, a little less broken, that's a win. It's a good use of 36 minutes of my time, which this monologue has lasted. Maybe I'll do this again sometime. Or maybe I will look at this and feel humiliated, but in any case, it's a good way to remember, spending your youth, at least being courageous. So